Hello, I'm Michael Szalapski, and I've been doing 3D animation, visual effects, and motion graphics for almost 20 years. Before I got this new gig at Maxon, my last full-time job for the past 12 years has been under heavy NDAs. But I put stuff from freelance gigs or free time fun on my site, so folks can see that I do in fact know how to use After Effects and Cinema 4D. If you're interested in seeing stuff I've done, check it out at the very easily spelled zalamproductions.com. Speaking of stuff I've done, you may have seen me in the 3D motion show a couple of months back, breaking down this energy drink commercial that I made in 2 days. Well, this time, it's not something you consume. This time, it's something that consumes you. Well, that was confusing and ambiguous enough to be considered art, right? Let's dive in and see how it was made. First things first, I want to talk about the background. Now, you might think, since I work for Red Giant, that it was made with Trapcode Particular, but you would be wrong. It's actually made with fractal noise. Fractal noise is, at its core, layers of interpolated noise. If you want to really understand it more fundamentally, an acquaintance of mine named Chris Zwar, who hangs around the motion design artist Slack, ask for an invite at motionslack.com, he's been in the industry for years, and he breaks fractal noise down quite nicely in this article on Pro Video Coalition. So check it out if you really want to understand the most powerful tool in your After Effects arsenal. I set the noise type to max, got that nice kind of scientific greebly looking stuff there, and ticked the all-important perspective offset box, which makes it look like multiple layers of noise moving across each other. I got a bit more influence from the sub, and it scaled it a bit larger so that the layers weren't so different, and lowered the complexity just a touch. Messed with the contrast and brightness to get the exact kind of look I wanted. And there you go. You've got a bunch of little layers of particles moving across each other. Add a bit of tint, and we're close. Now I get that it doesn't quite look right yet, but that's okay. We'll get our glowy goodness from Optical Glow in the Red Giant VFX suite, and I used a trick here that I mentioned in my previous presentation, but it bears repeating. When you want a hazy glow for some nice atmosphere, like the bloom you might get in your 3D renderer's post effects, but you want that glow to wrap nicely around your foreground objects, do this. Super comp. Apply Layer Glow, large, and Optical Glow, small. They're both the same beautiful, realistic glow algorithm, but one, Layer Glow, stays on its own layer, and the other wraps around every foreground layer. Oh, it wraps around them so prettily. I love Optical Glow and Super Comp so much. Anyway, when we apply that to our background, we get a nice glowy look, and it can wrap around our people. Speaking of our people, let's drop our lady into our shot here. We'll use Prime Matte to quickly key her and her hair out. Define the main key color with these little dots. Then we'll specify that this is our foreground, and then we'll specify that this is our background. By the way, you can use Prime Matte in Premiere Pro too, for those of you that do quick edit stuff and you want this power. Then we'll apply the spill killer to kill the spill. I'm new here, so don't ask me why it's so violent. Now, we'll add her to Super Comp. One of the main things that makes a good composite is matching colors. Now these clearly don't match at all, but I'm on a deadline. I don't have to try to color match this myself. Now Red Giant makes Colorista, which has a powerful set of color correction tools, and there's a lot of that tucked here into this effect in Super Comp. But what if I don't want to mess with tweaking all these color wheels? How about we just click one button? Yeah, I know. It's adjusted all of these values here for us so that we don't have to do anything. We can tweak it if we want to, but I'm not going to because it looks great. We just use a little bit of light wrap here some haze, and we'll bump that amount up from 5% to 10%, and we'll add just a little bit of diffusion to soften her up. Before super comp and after, I could do this all day. To make it really look like it's wrapping around her, I added CC cylinder with a large radius, and I just wanted to view the inside since we're supposed to be inside this cylinder, and a tiny bit of camera lens blur, and there we go. She's inside the love machine. I mean, look at how this bloom goes around her hair. It's gorgeous. I wanted to highlight around the people as if the machine were perpetually scanning them, and I turned to Universe Ecto. It's like Video Copilot's Saber effect, except you don't need masks. It just works on any alpha channel. And it's endlessly tweakable. You can change, colors, distortion amounts, distortion types, but I wanted it to be just around the layer of the person. Now I wanted it to be around more the outside of the person. So I wanted a nice smooth kind of outline. So I blurred it real quick, the slight blur, and I used Vegas. You can make these little lines with Vegas on all these options like saturation and intensity, but I'm working on the alpha. Speaking of alpha, since I did blur it, I wanted to crush the alpha channels just a little bit with levels here to get them nice and tight. I only need one segment of Vegas, made it nice and wide and hard because I didn't want any softness to it, and bumped the opacity up. And as you can see, now I've bloomed out the alpha of my layer, so when I apply Ecto, it is now outside the bounds of the person. Threw it into Super Comp for a bit of that optical glow, but not too much, just a subtle amount. Now, it's time for the FUI goodness you've all been waiting for. I decided that for the side shot, the shot looking at both of them, I wanted to show how much chemistry the two of them might have, as well as how well they matched in certain areas. This would be, for the people running the machine, this would be kind of their view of the scene. And then from the point of view of each person, the data that's shown is more like how much of a morning person, or how healthily they eat, or, things that might be interesting to their person data-wise. Also, the prominence of each love language. By the way, knowing about love languages can really help in a real-world relationship. Anyway, let's look at this main side shot. I knew the chemistry between the two of them was going to be important to the people running the machine, so that goes front and center. I used Universe Progresso for that main dial. Lots of useful presets to pick from. I chose one, put in my font, Futura Bold, bumped up the font size, got rid of the annoying decimals, and scooched the text down, tucked it behind the dial, picked a nice rich purple, knocked the ticks back just a touch, made the font color match, adjusted the angle, adjusted, all the kind of things you need to adjust to get the exact look you want. And voila! Then I animated it going up, because, they get to know each other and they're liking what they see. But I added a wiggle expression to show the uncertainty of their burgeoning relationship. I tweaked the same preset further for these smaller dials all around here. Then I used Universe HUD for all the extra FUI greebling on the sides here. Universe HUD has so many cool different things you can add. Anyway, I pre-comped all of it and used the set matte effect to keep it out of the inside of their glowy things. And then, to make it look more like a screen, I added optics compensation, popped it above the set matte effect, and cranked it up with reversed the lens distortion on it. So it's got that kind of neat little bent around a lens kind of look. Then it was time for Super Comp. I put just a little bit of light wrap on it, and just a bit of haze to help kind of set it inside that scene. And then, wouldn't you know it, I applied some optical glow. And I didn't want it to be too much, so I took the amount down quite a bit and put the size up to make it a little more diffused. What? You thought I wasn't going to put optical glow on something? Psh. Now, you may have noticed this swirling purple mist of love's machinations circling them. Finally, some trap code particular. I started with a simple fluid sim. Yeah, I know. Simple and fluid simulation don't usually go together. I changed the emitter type to be a 3D model because I want this to be going around the people, and picked this handy little tube short that's included. I changed it to explode because I just want the particles to stay there. I don't need a whole bunch popping out. Particles per second up to 1,000. Now, I don't want them moving by this random velocity. I want it to be all by fluid sim. So I put the velocity down to 0 and spun it on its side and made the model just a bit bigger because I want it to be going around them all the way. And now, as promised, your simple fluid sim, change it to a vortex tube and made it just a little bit larger than the emitter itself. And now look at this. We've got some really handy little swirly motion going on. But we can make it more interesting than that. We'll add some random swirl value, about 52 here, and hey, look at that. So maybe make the vortex strength a little bit stronger, and look at that, we got it going around these people. Now, it's actually just going in front of them, but Particular has a really handy feature here, so I can take the keyed part of them that is set as a 3D layer and make it an obscuration layer. So now, you've got particles going around in front and then around behind them. Neato bonito. But we're not even going to see these particles. We're going to turn them off. Then we have a new particle system we've added, and we don't need a whole lot of them. These are going to be emitting from the parent particles. We only need about 20 per second, and we don't want them moving at all either. They're going to get their motion from their parent particles. Speaking of which, there we go. We're emitting from the parent system, and they're getting that motion from the velocity of the emitter, but we want to bump that up even more to get nice party of particles. And we don't need it to last very long. 1.5 seconds on the life is really all we need. And we'll make that a little bit random so that when things are fading on and off, there'll be a little more variation in it. Now, we'll give these particles a bit more motion here with their own environment settings, completely separate from the fluid physics. We'll blow them upwards with some wind, so they have some more upwards motion, about negative 500 on Y should be good. And we'll use the air turbulence to make it affect their position by about 100, and we'll move that with the wind 80%. We've got a lot of nice organic motion happening inside this particle system. But we don't want just points, we want cloudlets, and we're going to make these big. But we're not going to stay big the whole time. We'll make them kind of fade, not down, but fade up, because smoke kind of tends to get bigger, and then we're going to make it fade down over time, opacity-wise. So we'll go up in size and then down in opacity, and we'll make the opacity 3. So we're going to go up from 3% opacity down to 0 over their life. Now we also want to have some nice color. We don't want it to just be white, and we don't need all these colors, so let's just go with a 2-color gradient, and we'll go with a nice pink and a nice purple to kind of stick with our love color theme. And we'll move the emitter down so it looks like it's kind of swirling up from the floor, and it should be good. Maybe a little bit lower. A little bit lower. That looks pretty good. And we'll pre-run it by 2 seconds so that this every time the scene starts, there's already particles there. We don't have to wait for it to happen. And then, of course, we're going to drop these particles in super comp. They're an additive layer, and we're going to give them a nice bit of heat blur so it just really makes them feel like they're part of this scene. We're going to blur the heck out of it to make it look nice and diffused. We're going to displace just a little bit. That really adds physicality to these particles. Soften it a touch, and then we're going to spread it. And this is what's going to be cool when we're going to spread chroma. This chroma split just really makes this feel like something that is actually happening. Speaking of chromatic split, here are some tips for those of you who are doing pure MoGraph or 3D animation. Some people think of Magic Bullet looks like slapping a heavy Instagram filter over their video, but it is so much more powerful than that. You can pop it open to just add some nice diffusion to your scene. Or, in our case, some diffusion, subtle chromatic aberration, some subtle anamorphic flares, and then Magic Bullet film to add some really nice and hard to describe flavor and grain to the overall piece. It just makes it feel more film-like. Before color grading, after color grading. Before, after. Look at that beautiful grain and color. Speaking of grain, I forgot to mention that SuperComp lets you control grain on a per layer basis. And then you get global controls as well. I applied it to all the layers except the people, and tried to match the overall grain settings to our footage. Oh, wait, the end title card. That took about 10 minutes with optical glow, CC scale wipe, and of course, Universe Analog. If you're not familiar with Universe Analog, it's a new plugin in Red Giant Universe that emulates what happens in the actual color space of a TV. So you've got things like phase and filter that emulate the look of the old tube TVs. You can get a lot of really unique looks out of it. I got this one. Well, anyway, that's the gist of things. You can follow me at The Great Zalam on Twitter for MoGraph tips, news, and sometimes memes. Or follow me on Instagram if you don't want to see much. But you should definitely follow Red Giant News on Twitter and Instagram. For Tip Tuesday, if for nothing else, I try to share a couple of useful tips every week for Trapcode, Magic Bullet, VFX Suite, or Universe. So thanks for watching the presentation. I hope you found it useful.